Move on now to a more finite look at drama and suspense in narrative. Specifically, drama is dealing with narratives that feature plots, and the author of this chapter, Cynthia Knobloch, who is a Zillman student, actually notes that plots is a very broad term for a temporal or time-ordered sequence of events that contains different events, discrete scenes that have causes and effect. These events are generally marked by conflict, where two or more characters are in opposition and there needs to be a resolution. As noted by Zillman in disposition theory, certain of these characters will be liked and others will be disliked based on the way that they act. Knobloch notes specifically that liking and cheering for certain characters to overcome conflict in these events can come via identification with characters, which resembles the kind of people, that's when we see a character on screen or in a book or in a game and we actually admire them or like them for some way, or via empathy, where we understand a character's plight and might in some way get connected to them. It's noted in the chapter here that this can occur for both like characters and dislike characters. However, they are one way that audiences get invested in conflict. And generally speaking, conflict is somewhat unsettling. We want to see resolution for conflict because it causes negative arousal for audiences, which moves us into mystery and suspense, which are two different forms of drama specifically that really encourage audiences to have fear, to have high arousal, negative states that they want to see resolved, but they do it in different ways. Mystery plots are those which feature drama, but information from the beginning of the narrative is withheld from the audience, so it forces them to think, what happened? How did this happen? They're at a constant state of curiosity about the plot, and that is where drama is derived from, this conflict of not knowing how things happened and wanting to see that resolution and wanting to see like characters, those who we identify with and empathize with, overcome. By contrast, suspense is a drama narrative in which the audience is certain about a bad outcome for a liked character. So, a lot of different cues within the narrative, the plot, cinematography, music, sound, etc. will lead the audience to believe that something bad will inevitably happen. And they will think, oh no, this bad thing is going to happen. So the feeling of suspense then is driven by audiences' anticipation for what is bound to happen and their empathy for the characters that they don't want to see it happen to. This causes a highly arousing state which is unsettling for audiences. Look at this scene. I would like to note that it's from Jaws, and there will be different ways that the scene, through foreshadowing, through cinematography, and through music, will lead you to believe that something bad will happen, and especially to more people than just one of the groups that something bad happens to. So watch through the scene and think about that previous slide, which said that suspense is caused by creating a situation where people think the inevitable will happen to liked characters.
Hey, Mike, I know you got a lot of problems downtown, but I've got a couple of problems at the house I wish you could take care of.
One, I've got some cats parking in front of the house. I can't get down to the office, and that garbage truck next to the office has got to be moved.
So what I need is a red zone. It's a simple thing you can take care of. You've done it before.
Honey, would you come here a minute,
okay?
please?
George.
Are you okay?
Everything's fine. Yeah, fine. It's fine.
Listen, if the kids go in the water and it's running, you...
No.
They can play out here on the beach.
It's all right. Let them go.
It's cold. We know all about you, Chief. You don't go in the water at all, do you?
It's some bad hat, Harry.
Chief Brody, you are uptight. Yes. Come on. That's it.
Pippet! Come on, Pippet! Pippet!
So, note how different the music, the over-the-shoulder scene, the fact that the main character was constantly scared might have led you to believe that something bad would happen. And of course, bad does actually happen in the end. So why do we want this sort of bad thing to happen? Well, the argument is made that 4 major mechanisms might be underlying this need for suspense, because I'm guessing there are many of you out in the audience right now among my students who actually really love horror and suspense movies. The first explanation is that of catharsis, which essentially states that the bad feelings that we experience during a suspense narrative allow us, the audience, to experience negative emotions in a safe place. So rather than feeling these bad things in the real world, in public, and crying and feeling scared, in a narrative, a book, a TV show, etc., these places are more safe and acceptable places to experience suspense, and thus we seek out these experiences so that we can experience negative emotions and not experience them in our day-to-day lives. Another explanation is that of escapism. So essentially we want to distract from our boring, sad existence of our real world with something exciting, even if it is not necessarily the most desirable emotional and arousing state. So it really unsettles us, but it's something that's different from our boring day-to-day monotonous life. The fourth explanation comes from Zillman's excitation transfer theory, which essentially states that the resolution of conflict is intense and exciting, and especially so in suspense, where everything centers around creating these unsettling feelings that are highly arousing for audiences. So the more distressful the narrative is, the more exciting the resolution is. If we're feeling really, really, really wound up by a suspense narrative, when it's finally resolved, and we see like characters get away unscathed or win the day and overcome the conflicts in the movie, we might note that these are really, really pleasant feelings because of the jag from those negative states that are super intense to the good feeling of the resolution. So that arousal might be desirable, especially for a bored audience, when essentially creates a very positive state when it is resolved at the end of the plot or at the end of a scene. Finally, one of the theories that was noted near the end of the chapter was social comparison. So some argue that suspense is essentially something that we desire and that we want to seek out simply because we want to watch people on screen go through bad situations, and it makes us feel better about ourselves. So when we see those children unfortunately being terrorized, we think to ourselves, at least that's not us, and that's the appeal of going and seeing these different narratives.